Be Funny Now is a party game made by Jacksfilms and Galvanic Games that follows a similar gameplay style to something like Quiplash. But following the months of its release, less and less people played the game. Just 4 months after the game was released, less than 5 people were playing the game. So what went wrong? On December 9th, 2021, Jacksfilms announced the launch of his video game Be Funny Now, a video game adaptation of his YouTube series Yesterday I Asked You. Yai is a simple concept. He asks the audience questions and he reads the comments on the next video. Eventually, in 2018, he started doing the series called Yai Live, which is where he streams questions, people answer them in real time, and then vote on the winner in each round. However, after the stream ended, people would keep playing, where someone in chat would ask a question and the others would answer. This inspired Jack to make a video game adaptation. In the announcement video, he says that the game is simple. People gather in a lobby, they're given a question, and they all vote on each answer to see who wins. It's a great concept, and it could definitely lead to many long-lasting memories with friends. Heck, I even made a few YouTube videos on it. So, let's get into how it failed. For most people, their main exposure to the game before its release date in May of 2022 was through videos on Jack's channel. Videos were coming left and right promoting his game. Perhaps a bit too many videos. In fact, including shorts, about 32 videos have been made on Jack's channel solely to promote Be Funny Now since it was announced. At a point, Jack even seemed to start replacing Yai with answers with Be Funny Now. This made a lot of fans upset at him because the people who don't care about the game and just wanted to see his content now had these videos oversaturating the channel. However, a little while after the game was announced, Jack announced some users to beta test it. As someone who was a part of the original beta testers of the game, the first impressions were great. Due to the lack of players and how early it was in development, I was never actually able to finish a game, but it was still fun nonetheless. However, when the game did release, what was it like? You've heard the general gist of how the game works, but what exactly happens in a match? Well, to start, you have 4 options to play. You can host a private match, join a private match, enter a public match, or answer the daily question. More on that later. When you click the host game button, you're greeted with a list of options, such as a password and the length of rounds. When you get to the game itself, you're asked to vote on a prompt, which may involve drawing or answering a prompt. Once everyone votes, a window pops up asking you to either type or draw your answer. After everyone answers, players then go one at a time, showing their answer to the rest of the players. The rest of the players then vote on the answers based on 4 emojis, which adjust that player's score for that round. They can also use tomatoes and golden roses, which affects that player's score dramatically. More on that later. The player being voted on can do various emotes and reactions based on how their answer is going. After that's done, they move on to the next round and repeat 2 more times. At the end, it tallies up your score and shows who wins. How high you're up on the leaderboard at the end of the match affects your prize at the end of the game. That's the main game. There is one more mode, however, called the daily question. This is a more global, non-timed version of the game, more similar to Yai. When you click on it, it shows who won the last question, then gives you a new prompt to then answer. Afterwards, you then vote on 3 answers chosen randomly from people across the world. At the end of the day, it tallies the votes and chooses a winner. How high you are on the overall leaderboard that day affects which prize you get. For example, if you're in the top 70% of answers or so, you can get about 200 coins. But when you're in the bottom 50, you'd only get 50 coins. And that's how the game works. Now that you have the context, let's get into what went wrong. Because this is a game made by Jacksfilms, it makes sense that Jacksfilms fans would play the game. This means that a majority of players simply are not funny, including me. Basically, in public matches, poop jokes, Among Us jokes, Jacksfilms references, etc. would basically guarantee you an instant win. There's a reason why Jackbox games don't have an automatic public matchmaking option. Some joy can be lost because these Jacksfilms fans can make jokes and references to Jacksfilms, and the people who don't understand those references completely have no idea why they'd be saying these things. Inversely, if you answer something that people don't find funny, then they are not afraid to downvote you into oblivion. At the same time, people that don't find Among Us jokes funny are absolutely tired of them, and they're also not afraid to downvote you into oblivion. But that's a topic for later. The prompts themselves weren't that good, honestly. Along with taking prompts from various YAIs, hundreds of new prompts were made just for this game. If that's true, it sure as heck doesn't show it. There have been multiple occasions where I get the same prompt, sometimes even as often as in the same game. Aside from that, there's various questions that just don't work that well for a timed global party game. To start with, the drawing prompts were just a drag to get through. For the people that aren't good at drawing, especially with a mouse, you know that you are automatically losing to the people that can actually make coherent drawings. Not to mention, just think for a moment, a player base full of mostly teenagers, plus drawing, you can probably guess what everybody would draw regardless of the prompt. Next, there's some prompts that are just too complicated. There are prompts that are like, a friend just texted you this, what shouldn't you answer back? Or like, write a question where the answer is blank. What happens with these is that some people just don't understand what they're supposed to do and end up generating an answer that's completely devoid of any context. I've been in so many matches where there's a prompt like write a question and then they proceed to not write anything that resembles a question. I think that if there's restrictions placed on the answer box so that you have to answer the prompt correctly, this would go a lot better. For example, there's some prompts that require you to fill in some blanks. Maybe instead of just having a text box where you can type multiple sentences in, they're just small text entry boxes, sort of similar to the Thriplash and Quiplash 3. Finally, there's some prompts that you just couldn't possibly provide a good answer for in the 60-second time frame that you're given. A great example are the poem prompts. In some prompts, it makes you finish a roses are red poem. This doesn't work because you simply don't have enough time to think of a good prompt that rhymes and makes sense with the prompt. These kinds of questions worked on YAI because they had close to an entire day to figure out what a good answer would be, which you don't have in a party game. Even from me describing it, you can probably see how the voting system would be problematic. For one, there's nothing stopping people from just doing an angry-faced reaction on every single post they see because it gives them more of a chance to win. Their thought process is that if they bring everyone else down, then they automatically win. This makes the public games terrible to sit through. The fact that people can buy tomatoes and golden roses to dramatically affect people's scores is incredibly imbalanced. Putting aside the voting system in the main game for a minute, the voting system in the daily question is pretty imbalanced as well. More often than not, you can find yourself voting between two identical answers. Look at this example right here. If the game were to recognize that these two answers were basically the same, then it would be able to do something about it. Possibly, the person that comes up with the answer first gets the credit, because they thought of it first. Maybe the game could split the gold between everyone that comes up with the same answer. Going back to the main game for a bit, an update added a meter above your emoji reactions that provided more clarity on how exactly you're doing that round. But if anything, this would encourage people to downvote people even more because they get immediate feedback to see if it's working. If they see that the meter is getting a bit too high, they can just throw a tomato. Luckily, the 2.0 update did fix most of these issues. Speaking of which, in an announcement video made in November of 2022, Jack said that he launched the 2.0 update to the game. This completely changed the voting system, along with changing a few other specific things about the lobbies and prompts. Instead of everyone in the lobby reacting to one answer at a time, it pins two answers against each other, more similar to a game like Quiplash. Then, everyone votes on their favorite one. After they're done, it pins the winning answers against each other like in the tournament. Jack says that these matches go a lot faster this way and leads to more balanced voting. To be fair to him, these are good changes and fix the majority of the issues I have with the game. At least it would if I'd been able to actually get into a round since then. Since the very beginning, it's been a hassle to even try to play the game. To get the biggest thing out of the way, the Android port barely runs. I have two friends who tried to play the game multiple times even after several updates, and the game would just keep crashing or refuse to run altogether. Has anyone else had that problem? It seems unlikely that this would be that common, since Jack himself uses his Android as his phone OS. Anyways, back to the game itself. Since the game was released, it has gradually been getting less and less active players. This tracks with how I've played the game, to be honest. Remember those two videos I made on Be Funny Now? Yeah, I haven't played a public game since then. Mainly because I simply haven't been able to. Because there's been next to no active players since July of 2022, there's been no one to play public matches with. And if you don't have friends that want to play with you, then you're just stuck playing the daily question. Even when I was beta testing the game, a month before it even released, I was always able to get into a match eventually. It's really sad. Putting that aside, let's talk about how it sends you into a match. When you click the Join Public Game button, it just automatically sends you into a game. When there's no active games, it just stays on the loading screen. I think that if it popped up with an extra screen after you click it showing all of the active games going on at the time, like in Among Us, it'd feel a lot more reliable and polished. Even if it popped up with something after the loading screen that just says, hey, sorry, there's no active games, but it doesn't. It's just an endless loading screen that stays stuck until it finds a game. To give the game credit for all of this, the fact that the game has no players isn't the developers or Jacksfilms' fault. In fact, I think the success of this game overall has to do with this next point. Even when it was first announced, people were making fun of it in the comments, saying that it was really similar to Jackbox games. But the thing is, I think that's completely fine. Jackbox games and Gartic Phone basically have a duopoly on that market. Adding some new competition would be great. But the problem is, Be Funny Now simply does not live up to the simplicity and convenience of these other games. While Be Funny Now is a free game and Jackbox isn't, with how often the party pack collections go on sale and sometimes are even given away, it really isn't that hard to pick up a copy. But if you can't afford it, Gartic Phone is also a free, web-based party game that I would personally recommend over Be Funny Now. Putting the price aside, the game simply isn't as good as its competitors, so it makes sense why it'd fail. And that makes sense considering this is Jack's and Galvanic Games' first attempt at a party game. Jackbox Games has an entire studio and more than 2 decades of experience behind their belt, so it makes total sense why that'd feel more refined. One more thing, with Be Funny Now, you have to download an app to play, whereas with Jackbox and Gartic Phone, you just have to go to a webpage on anything that can handle a website. This creates more inconvenience, and if you're with a group of 5+ people, getting everybody set up can take a really long time. Because of how simple this game is, I think it'd totally work as a web-based thing. It's not like it's rendering a 3D model in real time, so I think it'd work well. I think that if Jack went in a different direction for a sort of Yai video game and just made something more similar to how his Yai live streams looked and operated, just as a website, it'd have a lot more success. I've been really harsh and critical in this video, I'm not doubting that. But I don't hate the game. In fact, every time I played it, I really enjoyed myself in one way or another. Be Funny Now did a lot of things right, and it'd be unfair to not acknowledge those. For one, the music is amazing. It mixes together a lot of the jingles Jack has written in the past, making a sort of jazzy elevator music style that really works in the context of the game. Also, the currency and shop system in the game is great. The only things that you can buy with the currency system is for cosmetics only and doesn't affect the game itself at all. Also, the clothes and emotes you can buy from the shop circle around in batches of about 9 every half day or so. So if you really want to get a certain shirt or something, you'll have to be patient and save up your coins until you catch it in the shop. Not to mention, the coins themselves can be earned by just playing the game. You never have to pay real money for them. Also, the art style of this game is amazing. The way you can customize your character leaves basically endless possibilities on how people can look. If this art style were in a more polished experience like Jackbox, it'd fit right in. The scenery of being on a stage like a sort of stand-up comedian works with the concept really well. But all of these good things that it does not make up for the problems that the game had before the 2.0 update. If this game had a more active player base and it was a web page, not an app that you had to download, it'd be a serious competitor to Jackbox. But at the moment, if you wanted to play Be Funny Now online, then good friggin' luck. As Jack was saying as he relaunched Yai Live a few weeks ago, Be Funny Now is completely dead for online matches, but it's still a really great way to have some fun with friends.